Hello everyone, welcome to my channel English with Visali. Today we will discuss about Sita Speaks to the Dark Lord, BCA Third Sem English, written by Meena Kandaswamy, question and answers. In this poem, we are having 5 marks questions and 10 marks questions. First, we will discuss about 5 marks question and answers. First question: what does the phrase raw animal inside you say about Ravana's character? The phrase raw animal inside you suggests Ravana's cruel, lustful, and barbaric nature. It shows that his desires were uncontrolled and beastly, not guided by wisdom or humanity. Sita criticizes him for being driven only by passion, aggression, and selfishness. By comparing him to a raw animal, she points out his lack of respect for women and his inability to see her as a human being. It reflects his violent instincts and the way he treated Sita as an object to be captured rather than a person with dignity. This phrase uncovers Ravana's dark and inhuman side, which ultimately lead to his downfall. This is first question answer. Second one, how does Sita's voice convey her emotions and experiences in the poem? Sita's voice in the poem is bold, strong, and filled with pain as well as resistance. She speaks directly to Ravana, expressing anger at being treated like an object of lust. Her words carry emotions of suffering, humiliation, and betrayal as she was reduced to nothing more than a cause for war. At the same time, her voice is rebellious. She refuses to remain silent and challenges the power that Ravana tried to hold over her. Through her voice, readers feel her pain but also admire her courage. She transforms her personal suffering into a powerful statement against oppression, objectification, and violence. Next, third question: what commentary does the poem offer on the objectification of women? The poem strongly criticizes the objectification of women. Sita recalls how Ravana never saw her as a human being with feelings but only as a slab of meat and a prize to be won. She was treated as a possession and a reason for war, not as an individual with agency. This highlights how women in patriarchal societies are often reduced to symbols of honor, desire, or property. By giving Sita a strong voice, the poet challenges this objectification and reclaims Sita's identity as a woman with her own power, dignity, and resistance. The poem becomes a critique of how women are exploited and silenced, and instead presents them as fighters who can speak for themselves. Next question: how does the poem portray the power dynamics between Sita and Ravana? The poem shows that although Ravana had physical power, he abducted Sita and tried to control her. He could never truly dominate her spirit. The power dynamic is one sided at first, as Ravana uses his strength and authority to oppress Sita. However, through her words, Sita reclaims her power. She boldly tells him that he never loved her and only brought destruction upon himself. Her voice exposes Ravana's weakness. Though he was a mighty king, he could not gain her love or respect. The poem thus shifts the balance of power. Sita emerges stronger through her courage and defiance, while Ravana is shown as powerless in the face of her truth. Next question: what message do you think the poem conveys about the consequences of war and violence? The poem highlights that war and violence bring only destruction, suffering, and loss. Sita says she became the reason for Ravana's downfall, the death of his brothers, and the loss of his kingdom. Through her voice, we see that wars fought over pride, lust, or power destroy families, kingdoms, and even great warriors. In the end, Ravana lost his life for his wrongful actions, proving that violence does not bring victory but leads to ruin. The message is clear: war and violence are destructive forces, and those who are driven by greed and arrogance will ultimately face defeat. So, these are the 5 marks questions. Next, we are moving to 10 marks question and answers. 10 marks first question. Discuss the theme of objectification in the poem. How does Sita's voice challenge or reinforce traditional narratives around her character? The poem Sita Speaks to the Dark Lord by Meena Kandaswamy strongly highlights the theme of objectification of women. Traditionally, in epics and myths, Sita is often portrayed as a silent, submissive, and suffering wife who endures pain with patience. She is remembered mostly for her uh, chastity and devotion to Rama. However, Kandaswamy retells her story from a new perspective and allows Sita to speak directly to Ravana, the one who abducted her. In the poem, Sita uh, accuses Ravana of treating her as a mere object of desire. She says he never saw her as a human being but only as a slab of meat. This powerful phrase shows how she was reduced to a body script of identity, feelings, or respect. Ravana looked at her as a mm, possession, a prize of war, and not as an individual with her own dignity. This reflects how women in patriarchal societies are often objectified and valued only in terms of beauty, chastity, or usefulness to men. However, unlike the traditional narrative, here Sita refuses to remain silent. Her voice becomes an act of rebellion. She directly addresses Ravana, shaming him for his lust and cruelty. She openly declares that he never loved her and only destroyed his own family and kingdom because of his greed. In this way, Sita is no longer a passive figure but an active speaker who exposes the injustice done to her. Thus, the poem challenges the old image of Sita as a meek and voiceless woman. Instead, it presents her as a strong, courageous, and resistant voice who speaks against oppression. By doing so, the poet questions the patriarchal tendency to objectify women and redefines Sita as a symbol of strength and agency. In conclusion, the theme of objectification is central to the poem, but Sita's voice powerfully resists it. She challenges the traditional narrative of her character and emerges as a bold woman who demands recognition of her humanity. Here we are having key points also. Sita challenges her portrayal as a silent, submissive woman. Ravana treated her as an object of desire, a slab of meat, reflects patriarchal objectification of women. Sita directly confronts Ravana, refusing silence. She redefines herself as a strong, resistant voice. Poem questions uh, patriarchy and presents Sita as courageous. We are moving to next question. Examine the power dynamics between Sita and Ravana in the poem. What insights do their interactions offer into the complexities of power, control, and agency? The poem presents a very interesting picture of power dynamics between Sita and Ravana. On the surface, Ravana appears powerful. He is a mighty king, a warrior, and the one who abducted Sita and kept her imprisoned. He had physical strength, political authority, and control over armies. This gives the impression that Sita was powerless in his presence. However, the poem reverses this understanding by giving Sita her own voice of defiance. She openly tells Ravana that he never loved her, that she was nothing but a cause for his destruction, and that he eventually lost everything because of his wrongful actions. This shows that although Ravana controlled her body, he could never control her spirit, her dignity, or her truth. The interaction between the two characters reveals that power is not only physical. Ravana had external power, he could abduct, threaten, and wage wars, but he lacked moral and emotional power. On the other hand, Sita, though physically captive, displayed inner strength, resilience, and courage. Her refusal to accept him and her ability to speak out against him demonstrate that true power lies in self respect and resistance. The poem also, but from standing up against oppression and holding on to one's dignity. Here we are having some key points. First one, Ravana had physical power, armies, and authority. Sita appeared powerless but had moral strength. He controlled her body but not her spirit or dignity. Ravana's violence led to his ruin. Sita's voice and resistance proved her inner power. True agency lies in courage, self respect, and truth. So, next we are moving to third question. What commentary does the poem offer on the consequences of war and violence? How does Sita's perspective shape our understanding of these themes? The poem gives a very sharp commentary on the consequences of war and violence. Sita says that because of Ravana's lust and arrogance, great destruction took place. She became the reason for battles, for the death of Ravana's brothers, and for the fall of his great kingdom. Ultimately, Ravana himself lost his life. This shows that violence never brings real victory. Instead, it destroys everything. From Sita's perspective, the war was not a glorious act but a tragedy that brought suffering to many. She was treated as the central cause of the conflict, but in reality, she was a victim of Ravana's obsession. She reminds him that she was reduced to a curse, and a collateral damage. This highlights how wars are often fought over women, honor, or pride, but the real result is only loss and destruction. The poem also reveals the uh, futility of violence. Ravana thought he was proving his power by abducting Sita, but his violent actions only weakened him and destroyed his own people. Sita's voice shows that violence may appear powerful for a short time, but it always leads to downfall. By giving the story from Sita's point of view, the poet changes our understanding of war. Typically, wars in epics are portrayed as heroic and noble, but here they are depicted as useless, destructive, and inhuman. Sita's suffering and pain remind us that behind every war there are innocent victims who lose their homes, families, and lives. In conclusion, the poem conveys that war and violence are senseless and destructive. Through Sita's voice, we understand that wars fought for pride, lust, or power and only in ruin. Her perspective shapes the poem into a powerful critique of violence, teaching us that true strength lies in peace, justice, and respect for human dignity. Here we are having some key points. First one, Ravana's lust and arrogance caused destruction. War led to deaths of his brothers and fall of Lanka. Sita seen as a cause and collateral damage. War is portrayed as tragic, not glorious. Violence brings downfall, not true victory. Sita's perspective highlights futility of war and need for peace. So, friends, like this I have explained for question and answers. Okay, thank you. If you watch this video, please like, share, and subscribe my channel.